Hello everyone, I am back. How you doing? I want to spend some time today recording the solo episode because I have a lot of things to talk about and I have a lot to get off my chest. But I want to get this video out before January 20th, when Trump takes the oath of office. High noon, January 20th. So I'm trying to get this out before then. I hope I do. I'm a little sick. The script for this was rushed. I had a lot more that I wanted to say. I'd only focus on a few things. But thank you for watching. I appreciate it. And let's begin. I want to start with a warning that dates all the way back to the 1930s in the form of a great American novel. It Can't Happen Here, the novel, is a dystopian work of fiction by Sinclair Lewis and was first published in 1935. The book explores the rise of fascism in the United States. The story follows the election of a charismatic, authoritarian, populist politician, Berzelius Buzz Windrow, who then seizes power and dismantles democratic institutions, leading to the imposition of a totalitarian regime. The novel serves as a chilling reminder of how easily democracy can be undermined, especially through manipulation, fear, and the erosion of civil liberties. The key lesson from the novel, It Can't Happen Here, is that democracy is fragile and it must be actively protected. It warns the dangers of complacency, the potential for demagogues to rise to power, and the importance of vigilance in defending democratic values. It reminds us that authoritarianism can take root even in established democracies if the people are not careful or engaged in preserving their freedoms. At the end of the day, it can happen here. It can happen here. Dictatorship can happen in the United States, is possible. This is something we must all, as Americans, come to terms with. It can happen here. Our so-called guardrails, such as the courts or our Constitution, are not preordained or predestined to protect us. They are fallible. For instance, let's take the Constitution of the United States. It is more than just a set of laws. It's a framework for justice, liberty, and the rule of law. But for it to function as intended, it requires more than just ink on paper. It requires a collective commitment to abide by it. And I fear that commitment to the Constitution is severely lacking in this incoming administration. A Constitution only works when citizens, leaders, and institutions respect its principles, adhere to its provisions, and uphold its values. If we lose that willingness to follow the Constitution, we risk undermining the very foundation of our democracy. It is a living document, yes, but its strength lies in our collective responsibility to honor and protect it every day. The Constitution of the United States, while a foundational document that outlines the principles of governance and individual rights, it is not self enforcing. This means that the Constitution alone does not guarantee the protections of its provisions or automatically ensure that laws and policies align with its principles. It relies on active participation by all branches of government, legislative, executive, and judicial, as well as the engagements of citizens to uphold and enforce its mandates. In essence, the Constitution's effectiveness depends on the ongoing commitment, have that underlined, of the people and institutions to respect and adhere to its guidelines, making it a living document that requires continuous protection and enforcements. To summarize, the Constitution only works when our government, be that local, state, or federal, agree and consent to abide by it. Think of it this way: soccer only works when both teams agree to play by the rules. If one individual playing soccer forsakes the rules, the whole game falls apart. For almost 250 years, the United States has been led by men, so far, who have agreed to abide by the Constitution. For 250 years, we've had presidents more or less follow the law, follow the Constitution. We have had bad presidents, but never before have we had a chief executive ignore and disregard the Constitution. Even Richard Nixon agreed to step down and resign when it became clear he was to be impeached. He could have fought back. He could have used the levers of power at his disposal, such as the military, to push back against the impeachment effort being led by Congress. But in the end, President Nixon chose to uphold the spirit of our political system, and he tendered his resignation. We have gotten incredibly lucky that it has taken this long for a man who plainly disregards our Constitution and rule of law to be elected president. But here we are. If Mr. Trump wants to ignore the Constitution or the rulings from the judiciary, he can do that. It will be a first, but it is entirely possible. The only constitutional recourse would be impeachment by the House and conviction and removal from office in the Senate. And we all know that the House and Senate Republicans will never, under practically any circumstances, impeach their leader, Mr. Trump. So if something this extreme ever happens, if Mr. Trump ever blatantly violates the Constitution or the rulings of a court, it will be left to us, citizens of this nation, along with civil society groups, to push back against any and all abuses of power. We will need to take to the streets, protest and voice our dissent. Work stoppages, or even a general strike, have been incredibly effective in other countries, such as Israel, at getting governments to backtrack and back down over abuses of power. We as Americans need to prepare ourselves to take matters into our own hands. The unthinkable happens during the next Trump administration. Our democratic institutions and values are not guaranteed, and they require constant vigilance and active participation to remain strong. If we become complacent, if we allow power to concentrate unchecked or undermine our democratic principles, we risk the erosion of the freedoms we hold dear. We must remember that the health of our democracy depends on the commitment of each generation to protect it. Commitment. All right, and now here's a brief news roundup in the style of veteran newsman Walter Winchell, who guided the United States through the 40s and 50s on radio. And maybe, if you're lucky, I will insert an example of his style of reading the news if I have time or the will to edit this any further.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. North and South America and all the ships at sea. Let's go to press. Flash. Bern, Switzerland. An unconfirmed report states that Italy is on the verge of civil war. The King and Marshal Badoglio are reported safe in southern Italy. London. The commander-in-chief of the Italian fleet was killed on Friday when the German bombers destroyed the dreadnought Roma. Washington, D.C. Military observers in the capital expressed the belief tonight that Mussolini's reported rescue by the Nazis is a fishing expedition on the part of the Germans to find out just where the Duce is.
But I really like Walter Winchell. I love listening to his old stuff, and I thought, why not give this a shot? That extremist ideologies could start calling the shots in the heart of Europe. But don't be fooled, folks. This is a high stakes game, and Brussels is getting nervous. A ship to the far right in Austria could send shockwaves through the entire EU as old tensions over immigration, national identity, and the economy heat up once again. Will Austria stay in the center, or will the far right rise to the top? You can bet the whole continent is holding its breath. This story is far from over, folks. Stay tuned. Moving on to southern Japan, big news. Japan is eyeing the city of Sasebo as a strategic hub for its self-defense forces. The plan, well, it's to turn the port city into a powerhouse for amphibious operations designed to bolster the country's ability to defend and, if need be, recapture remote islands, particularly in the southwest Nansei chain. Now, let me tell you guys, this isn't just about flexing military muscle. It is a direct response to rising tensions in the region, with China's growing influence stirring the pot. Japan's making it crystal clear they're ready to protect what's theirs. The big question now, will this new fortification effort spark more regional tension, or will it send a clear message that Japan's military power is a force to be reckoned with? Moving on to Brussels. The chief of NATO, Mark Rutte, is shaking things up with a bold suggestion to the European Parliament. Hold on to your hats, folks. He's calling for a rethink of social welfare spending in Europe to help finance the military splurge that's now deemed necessary for the region's security. That's right, folks. NATO's top brass says Europe needs to dig deep, not just for welfare programs, but for defense budgets too. With tensions high across the continent, especially in light of the crisis in Ukraine, Mark Rutte argues that cutting back on social safety nets could free up cash to bolster military forces. The idea is unsurprisingly stirring the pot, with some lawmakers outraged at the thought of sacrificing social programs for tanks and weapons. But others say it is a necessary evil if Europe is to keep its head above water in these dangerous times. This one is a real nail biter, folks. Welfare versus warfare. And you can bet the debate's only just begun. Now in Southern California, in a heartfelt move of international solidarity, Ukraine, yes, Ukraine, has just offered to send 150 firefighters to help California battle the raging wildfires that have been tearing through the Golden State. And let me tell you, folks, this is a big one. The government in Kiev is up, stepping up, extending a hand of support during one of California's most devastating wildfire seasons in memory. The Ukrainian crews, trained and ready, could make all the difference as flames threaten homes, wildlife, and communities across the region. This comes as a real show of global unity. No doubt a move that's sure to catch the attention of both people of California and the world. California's in flames, but now, folks, help is on the way. Stay tuned. This is the kind of story that reminds us of the power of global cooperation in times of crises. And finally, moving on to Ottawa. The political pot there is boiling over. and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is right in the hot seat. The word is the man's under fire from all sides. The opposition's been howling about his government's handling of everything from the economy to ethics. Now, don't get me wrong, his supporters are sticking to their guns, but the polls, they're looking shaky, real shaky, folks. Canadians are riled up over inflation and housing costs, while critics are wondering where all that pandemic recovery money went. The Liberals are scrambling, the Conservatives are circling, and let me tell you, this could be a real doozy of an election down the road. And that's the buzz from up north, folks. Keep your eyes peeled on this one. It's heating up. And finally, on a little more of a sad note, Donald Trump won the past election fair and square. He won not only the Electoral College, but also the popular vote with 49.9%. Much to my disappointment, the American people chose Donald Trump to be our next president. I think that was a mistake. Over the next 4 years, we as a nation will reap what we sow. We'll get it good. We asked for it. Hold on tight. I promise you it will be a bumpy ride, but I'll be here. So help you get through it. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. Every single um, person who watches or listens. It means a lot to me. I really appreciate it. And I hope to be back doing more of this soon. So don't go anywhere. Thanks.